All right, so I'm trying to figure out a smart way to talk about the things that I understand in the retail world. I was born in New York City in some crazy period of time. I remember when I was 7 years old, my dad took me to an electronics store that he owned with a couple of his brothers on Chambers Street in New York City. And that was like in the 70s. And by the time I was 11 years old, I could fully understand the extreme boredom of being in retail, standing behind the counter waiting for a customer to come along. And it was the same experience I had when I was in school, and I just couldn't concentrate or focus or had no interest in the subject matter. I would look up at that clock with the giant second hand and would wait for the minutes to go by to get out of there. So my real first job in retail, separate from my family business, was I worked for this guy. I think his name was Paul Ehrlich, Pete Ehrlich, Steve Ehrlich, some Ehrlich guy. And I must have been about 17 years old. And the only skill set that I had, which I was actually terrible at, was standing at the door of a wholesale electronics company he had in California, checking people's orders as they were leaving to make sure they weren't stealing. And I have to be honest with you, I was 18 years old, and I didn't really have that much character going on for me. There was a customer that would come every day to pick up car stereos and portable radios. This is back in the late 80s. And he would give me a $20 tip, and he basically trained me to look the other way. He was stealing. And I'm sorry for that, obviously. And, I was a dumb kid, and I never really got a chance to make amends to the business owner, but I did actually partake in theft from a business owner. And so for that, I'm wrong. And I'm sure that in my retail businesses, people have stolen from me. And so I guess what I do in my mind in order for me to redeem myself is I forgive them. Of course, a retail business should be set up properly so that theft becomes more and more restricted and nearly impossible. But, obviously it depends on the type of retail business you're in. The last 10 or 11 years of my life, I concentrated on food and beverage retail. Very fast moving. I started a chain in New York City in 2010 called Juice Press. And relative to other businesses, Juice Press was a success. We got to 85 stores. We had 30 plus stores inside of the health club Equinox. We opened a store in Seattle, Las Vegas. We had 2 or 3 locations in Boston, plus a couple more in Boston in the Equinox stores. And through Equinox, we were in Connecticut and New Jersey. But most of our stores were in the tri-state area of New York. Certainly the brand was built in New York. The progression began with the building of store number 1, which was on East 1st Street in the Lower East Side of New York City, 2010. I had a tiny store. It was 300 square feet of actual usable retail, maybe a tiny drop less, and including the bathroom. And the idea for the business came along for me in 1997 when I was watching this guy, Doug Green, who had a juice bar called Liquiteria on East 11th Street. I was a customer there, and I would watch his business like a hawk would watch a mouse scurrying about on the forest floor. I was obsessed with his business. First of all, I was obsessed with the product. I was there 2 or 3 times a day. And over the years, I got friendly with the owner, and we would talk about life and business. And I thought we had a pretty good rapport. and I thought he was a nice enough guy to meet. What I was fascinated about his business was it seemed that in the retail business that this guy was doing exactly what I would have loved to have been doing at that stage of my life. Have a retail store in the downtown area rather than uptown, which was the area that I was familiar with because of my family business being in art and antiques. And my family business was really slow and boring. Liquiteria, Doug's business was high pace, lots of action, plenty of sunlight, plenty of opportunity to sit on a bench, drink a juice, drink a smoothie, have your salad, sit on, you know, the curb, or sit on a neighboring stoop and talk to people in the East Village. So what Doug had was something that I really admired, and in my mind, I really wanted to do that. And so it took me at least 10 years to figure out how I was going to go from the retail businesses that I was familiar with into the food and beverage business. And it was very scary for me because at that stage of my life, going back to when I was in my mid 30s, I don't think that I was an entrepreneur. I don't think I was a businessman. I think I was more of a salesman, and I was a hustler. And what I didn't realize was that I was observing retail from a really unique prism, which was my father's retail business, which was a very, very lucrative business, art and antiques. But the level of precision that one would have to create a sale that was large with good amount of profit, you really had to have a certain mindset, and you had to follow a religion of selling, from how you started with the customer to how you actually enabled money to exchange hands. The exposure that I got in that business to sales above $1 million, sales for 200,000, 100,000, 50,000, 600,000. Over the years, I got very accustomed to getting to the closing portion of a sale and asking a customer to give me their credit card and let me charge, $500,000 on it. And so the juice business actually seemed a little too simplistic, because the product that you were selling was a $10 or an $11 product. Plus you had to produce something, and plus you had to manage a different kind of labor. And there's just so many details in the food business that have nothing to do with dry goods. So that's, I think, why it was intimidating for me. The one experience that I had prior to opening up my juice business was, for about 7 years, I had a retail skydiving and parachute equipment store. Started as a mail order business from my apartment. It actually started as a video production company that I started in 1995 in skydiving. I was producing some training films for intermediate skydivers, and the business evolved. And by 1998, 1999, I had a pretty robust mail order business. I was doing lots of advertising, and I was generating some good cash flow. And the logical progression for me there was to be on a busy drop zone with a parachute equipment store and parachute maintenance, parachute rental systems. I was selling everything for skydiving A to Z, and it was an extremely complex, very, very underfunded business. And that business, over the course of, I'd say, 4 years, I was in it for 7. Over the course of 4 years, I was in survival mode, 7 days a week, obsessive working, 14-hour days, sometimes longer. In the summertime, I'd be up at 6 in the morning at the drop zone for the first load, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't getting out of there until I got all my equipment back and every customer had whatever they needed for the next day. I'd be done in the summertime by 8 or 9 o'clock. So they were very long, exciting days, lots of stuff going on, and that business really trained me to be tireless. When I left that business in 2003, 2004, I went back immediately to work for my father. He had an art and antiques business on Broadway and 11th Street, which eventually we opened a retail store together on 55th Street. That business was like standing still to me compared to my skydiving business because the action was so incredibly slow and the margins of profit were so much higher, you could afford to really be lackadaisical and sloppy. And in the skydiving business, every penny meant something. And I was managing a lot of transactions that were very, very low margin. And so I was constantly getting myself into cash crunch crises there. Every month I would, I'd wake up in a panic state because I'd be negative $200,000 in my bank account. But I didn't realize that over the weekend I was waiting for transactions to come in and $211,000 was coming in. And so I covered whatever I needed to cover and I had my profit pad in there. But it was really hand-to-hand combat every day because I was so disorganized and did not have proper systems to manage all the finances. And so really, in truth, this was a lemonade stand that was doing a couple of $1 million in sales annually. I was walking around most of the time with, anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 in cash in my pocket. I would make payroll from my pocket. I remember staff coming up to me sometimes twice in a day asking me to pay them, and I would pay them forgetfully twice, and then I would realize, wait a second, why did I just pay that person twice? And I would go back to that person and say, why did you ask me to get paid twice? And then they would apologize, but people took advantage of me because I was such a disorganized guy. But what I had as talent was I definitely had tenacity, and I was completely unafraid to work my ass off. And I was creative and I was good at branding, and I wasn't afraid to take risks. So when I left the skydiving business, I was really moving at warp speed. When I got back into my dad's business, it took me a couple of years to really get on my feet and make a decision that I didn't want to be in my dad's business. It was just too boring for me. So I had a pretty good 2006, 2007, 2008. And by 2008, I left my dad's business and I said, Pops, I'm out of here. And I sat for about a year writing a business plan on how I was going to execute in the juice business. So I was ready to take that step. And really what I did was I just studied the three businesses that seemed really hot at the time. One of them was Liquiteria. The other was Organic Avenue in New York. It was retail. And there was more of a cleanse business that was concentrating more on wholesale, I believe, in supermarket. They didn't really have a retail presence. The name of that company was Blueprint. And back in 2008, 2009, the juice category was just becoming really fashionable. And, it'd been around obviously for years before that, but it was really coming to the tipping point in 2009. It was still the age where there weren't juice bars all over the place. And the ones that were popping up, they weren't that good. So 2009 comes along. I have this business plan in a 3-ring binder, and it really just illustrated that I had an understanding of what I thought the categories of Liquiteria's business were. What I had observed from the outside was that he had a good juice business, a good smoothie business. He had a good soup business. He had a juice cleanse business. He had snacks at the register, and some miscellaneous things like, bad coffee and hot tea. Throw a tea bag in a cup. Good night. There really wasn't much more to it at the time. What he also had going for him was he had a very amazing location in New York. It was in a position in New York where uptowners could find it pretty easily. They knew where it was. And the people that really loved the movement of, wellness were really stacked in Soho, East Village, Lower East Side, Gramercy, West Village. So his location on 2nd and 11th was a pretty good destination spot. And his storefront was a corner. He had good benches. There was always sunlight. And the way he would keep his windows open at time or his doors open, the store was very inviting and friendly. And the audience really said to themselves, this is what premium healthy smoothies and juice look like. And people accepted him as one of the premium guys in the industry. And the truth is, at the time, he was. And so what I wanted to do in my space was I wanted to answer to the things that Doug would not answer to, that I thought were very important to the consumer, that were very important to me as a consumer, which were Doug did not take a stance on organic produce. His business model was set up where he would say that they were organic whenever possible, which after doing organic for 10 years, organic is always possible. The prices may fluctuate. The retail price that you have to sell things for might be 30% higher. Occasionally something runs out, but there's always a substitute available, and things don't generally run out for very long. So the idea was really simple, is that not to really focus on why Doug wasn't organic. Let's just say that he was stuck, in my opinion, in his own paradigm, which when I came into the business, I showcased the fact that I was 100% organic. And so I believe that that was a real selling point for us downtown. We were 10 blocks away from him on East First Street. The other thing that I think that we specialized in was we had a much wider selection of cold pressed juices. Doug had taken cold pressed juices and buried it into a sliding door glass refrigerator on your left-hand side of the register. There was no signage. There was no explanation of what cold pressed juice was. There was no instructions on how to use it. And so only the very elite, in the know customers really understood what a bottled juice was at that time. And if you were a traditional juice drinker, you were used to coming into Doug's place and ordering a juice, and they would make it on a rotary machine. And the rotary machine and the cold pressed juice, in my opinion, were not just in competition with each other for your dollars, but they were in conflict with each other. Because if cold pressed juice is the premium product and it's the thing that you're really trying to promote, because people take 3, 4, 6, 7 juices at a time versus just taking one rotary made juice at that moment. If you had rotary juice, you really weren't creating a great argument why cold pressed juice was better. So also I knew that rotary juice, you had to have a machine that was basically dirty most of the day because there was pulp and fiber in there, unless you were cleaning it out 5 or 6 times a day. You were obviously cross-contaminating flavors. Your produce was either refrigerated or room temperature, and the refrigeration is generally inadequate for the rotary juice to be cold enough to drink. And so what I believed about the rotary juice was that there were less rotary juice drinkers out there, especially to bring new people into the juice movement. One of the mechanical advantages of cold pressed juice was that we could put it in a bottle, put it in the refrigerator, and we could make it extremely cold, which made it palatable for non-juice drinkers, especially the really bitter stuff. So what we saw in cold pressed juices, because of the cold temperature, was people who hated greens loved the taste of a super green juice. One of the most popular juices at Juice Press was a drink called Mother Earth, which had absolutely no fruit in it except a little bit of lemon. It was a very, very bitter drink, and it was the most popular juice because people felt that they were doing something healthy, and at the temperature being cold, it was actually pretty good. Kind of addictive, like drinking coffee. So in the next talk I'm going to start to carry on a little bit about how I started to translate my business plan into something that was happening into action. So I hope that you'll tune into that.